Hey YouTube, and all of you that sometimes tune in to Ron's Fuel Stop. This is Ron with Ron's Fuel Stop, and I wanted to make a video about what I see and what I think about when I'm driving down the road. I think a lot of people, one of the things we even use out there in truck driving land is we call some guys steering wheel holders, because it doesn't seem like they're even driving a truck. All they're doing is holding the steering wheel and going from one place to another while they're doing all kinds of other things, everything except driving the truck. And it seems like some new generation of truck drivers, some of them are like that, and particularly I dislike it very much. I will reference some things that you could probably put into the category of steering wheel holder. But first of all, let me just cover some of the stuff that I think about while I'm going down the road. And I think it's good for those people who drive four-wheelers to also think about what truck drivers are thinking about when they're going down the road. Now, first of all, let me just mention that I drive a 2017 Peterbilt. That tractor weighs almost 20,000 pounds. And with the trailer and loaded, often I am between 60 and 80,000 pounds, and we're driving down the road anywhere from 55 to 70 miles an hour on the freeway. And so when I get into my truck, I'm looking at the gauges. As I get going, I'm looking at RPMs. I'm trying to be between about 1100 and 1500 RPMs while I'm on the road for maximum torque, towing power, and fuel economy. I'm looking at my fuel gauge, because I have run out of fuel one time. I am going between a number of gauges, not just the speedometer and the tachometer, but the temperature gauge for the engine. When you're pulling a hill, it often gets pretty hot. I'm looking at the turbo boost, so that if I can back off a little bit, I know I'll save some fuel. I'm looking at the front axle temperature on a hot day, especially if I'm running heavy weight. It seems like it gets pretty hot. I'm looking to make sure every series of scans, multiple times within a minute, what my air pressure is, to make sure that my air pressure is not getting below 100 pounds, because I know I wouldn't be able to stop this big thing. And I'm constantly aware of the condition of my truck. I listen for sounds. I don't like wearing even the headphone over one ear. Sometimes I'll wear that when I'm listening to a book. And just generally speaking, I will say that my mind sometimes is available for things like listening to a book, listening to music, listening to a podcast. But overall, I would say that driving the truck 60 hours a week, that 70, 75, 80% of the time, my mind is not available for those kinds of things, because my mind is on the task of driving a truck. One example would be simply that I recently got another book on tape that I was listening to, and is 15 hours and 47 minutes. And it took me over 2 weeks to listen to that book, even though I was driving probably over 100 hours in those 2 weeks. I only had, I just finished it today, the 15-hour book. So most of the time, so I'm driving down the road, what am I looking at? Well, I get on the road, I'm looking at the speed limit, very aware of the speed limit. I'm very aware of signs on whether it's a 2-lane or a 4-lane, 6-lane road. The merge signs, which lane that I need to be in for making a turn. I will move over to the lane I need about 1 mile to 2 miles prior, so I don't get in a pinch and I don't get any of you four-wheelers, regular cars, stuck in between me to where I have to cut you off, because I can't slow down. I have to merge. And you'll find sometimes that we are working our way in, because we can't just move over, slow down, speed up like a car can. It takes me a quarter mile really to stop. and it takes me about the same, or even up to a half a mile, even a mile if there's a little bit of an incline, to get up to 55, 60 miles an hour. That's why you get a little impatient with us. What else am I looking at? I have got my eyes tuned so close for construction signs. When I see orange, I just kind of bristle and my butt cheeks lift me up a little bit, and I'm paying super close attention. Two things happened this week in regard to orange detour signs. I was on Tunkhannock in Pennsylvania. Tunkhannock is what it looks like. Picked up there and pulling that load. And I was on 11, Pennsylvania 11, and on the way in I noticed it had a split, and then it came back together. 2-lane road. The eastbound went one way, the westbound split the other side, and I couldn't see. On a 2-lane road, it's not very common that the lanes split. So on the way back, I was paying attention to that, and I noticed it said 11 east, 11 east. Well, I decided to go the same way. I went to the left, and all of a sudden, it ends and it's turning around and putting me back to the direction where I came from. I had to go 11 miles back to find a place that I could turn around and go forward again. That's 22 miles out of route, which meant that night I didn't get to stay where I wanted to stay. So that's another thing I'm thinking about. I'm thinking, where am I going to stop next? Because I can't just decide that spur of the moment. Where I'm going to stop next takes some planning. And usually at the beginning of every day, I know where I'm going to stop for fuel. I decide where I'm going to stop for a break. And I know where I'm going to stop that night, because I don't want to end up in a bind finding a place to park. And you see these guys parked on ramps on the freeway. I just can't see myself doing that, all night long, cars and trucks going by, and you just feel the truck moving like this. I can't sleep that way. So I got to have my sleep so I can be a good driver. Anyway, thinking about, what else am I thinking about? Every time I see a car go by, I'm looking at the people, particularly coming down a ramp. So a car's coming down a ramp. They're merging to their left. They're coming to my right. And I catch sight of them as soon as I can. I want to see them. About 6, 7, 8 times out of 10, they're on their phone. They're totally engaged in their phone, and they're not even paying attention. So I try very hard to move over a lane so that they can make their way onto the freeway. If I don't, I've had it where they are suddenly right beside me, and they're startled that there's actually somebody on the freeway that they're merging onto. Often people come down the ramp and they're only going 35, 40, 45 miles an hour. They're not really realizing, oh, I'm going to be on a freeway. So they come down a ramp in front of you, and now there's a 20 mile an hour difference between the speed they're going and what I'm going. So I got to navigate around that. I'm constantly aware and thinking about that. I'm looking for that at all times. I'm looking at the driver in my rearview mirror. Sometimes we call them the California mirrors. They stick out on the sides. And I'm looking there. I'm looking over here. I'm seeing the people who are coming up on me. They're overtaking me, but they're veering out of their lane. I can tell a car and person that's on their phone, and I'll look down, and I don't know, those of you that are my friends and family, you need to know that a truck driver can totally see down into your car and see what you're wearing, what you're doing. If you're on your phone, very easy to tell. The other day, 2 guys went by. One guy had his phone out. He was playing video on it, and he was showing porn to the driver. And I could tell they were veering down the road. And I had seen him in the rearview mirror. In the California mirror, I could see the guy was drifting out of his lane because they were more paying attention to what was on this guy's phone. That is very typical. One day I counted 20 some people in a row that were on their phone. This was in between Chicago and Madison. That's not an easy place to drive, not on your phone. And it's not surprising how many accidents. Last time I went through Chicago, there were 5 accidents. It took me over 2 hours to get around Chicago. Should only take me 1 hour, and that's because so many people running into each other. I'm looking at the people in the car. Often I think about them. And I think about the children that are in the car, and are they safe? Are they in good care? I think about my grandkids who got hit by a truck in the car that my son Nate was driving when a truck merged or changed lanes and didn't pay attention to see that a car was next to him. So the people in cars have to realize that guys do this all day long, often 6 and 7 days a week. They're paying many of them are really paying great attention. I mean, there's literally several million of us out there on the road. And when you think of how few things happen, even though they're terrible when they do happen, I'm so glad that today when I saw one of the orange signs, and this was on I-71 south of Akron, and it was on a 4 or a 6 lane highway, and it was construction, and one of the lanes went to the left and it went over into the onbound, and there was a concrete barrier up, and you're sharing with the onbound. The eastbound lane and the westbound lane were only separated by a concrete barrier. And then on the other side, on the regular westbound side, they were doing a bunch of construction, and then over to the shoulder there was a lane with concrete barriers. And all of a sudden it comes up, there's a fork, it doesn't say which side trucks are supposed to take. I in my head, very quick decisions go on, and I think there's going to be a ramp coming down from the right eventually, and it's going to come in, and there's only going to be a 1 lane there, and that's going to be an uncomfortable situation, so I'm taking the left. I think that's what went on in my head very quickly, because only had a few seconds to decide. Left lane. I'm going on the left lane, and before long I see a backup on the right lane, and all of a sudden I can tell that it had probably only been a minute or two earlier. Somebody had come down the ramp, not realizing that there was only a single lane of traffic and there wouldn't be room for them to merge, and they came on there in 2 vehicles, 2 cars, a pickup, a car with an old couple in it, and a motorcycle, all got into it with each other. And a motorcycle driver was laying on the road, not moving, and the motorcycle was partially under one of the cars, and traffic was backed up, and they weren't going nowhere. And I was going by on the left lane, which was separated by the median. All of that from a momentary decision. And what happens is people don't pay attention with them. They don't drive when they're going down the road. They're just in their car, going from point A to point B, going by memory, going by rote, not thinking. And what has to happen with us truck drivers is we have to drive for everybody. We're driving our rig, and we're looking at the whole field of people around us. Very few of them driving, just in a car going down the road 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. And we're navigating through that mess every day. It definitely does make it so at the end of the day you are very exhausted. So I see signs. I try to learn the different regions I'm in. So when I'm driving through Ohio, I think about what are the advertisements from Ohio? What are the people like in Ohio? What are the kind of cars they drive? What do the people look like? What culture do they seem to be from? Pennsylvania. What's the economy seem like it's doing in Pennsylvania? It really seems like it's turning around. A lot more truck traffic, a lot more heavy haul traffic. You can tell about the mining that's going on. What are the people like in the Northeast? They're a little bit more educated in their driving. I was just out to Uxbridge, Massachusetts, and people don't use the right lane very much. They know it's kind of for getting on and getting off. They stay in that middle lane and that left lane, and that right lane's kind of emptied out a lot of the time because they're educated, they're experienced in their driving. Then you get into a small town, and they're just out to see what's going on in the world. And are you in a hurry? Boy, I'm not in a hurry. I'm out of work, or it's the weekend, or I'm retired, and a totally different situation. So anyway, we see many things. I love the visual stimulation. There's so much constantly to see. Seasons, crops coming up right now, and so much going on.